Hi everyone, my name's Chris and I'm from the RCEA. Thank you for joining this evening's seminar on the Island Line upgrade works. Before we get on to the presentation, I'd like to run through a couple of slides. In particular, the way you can keep updated on RCEA events and news. So we have a website, we have Twitter, LinkedIn and Facebook, so please do join those. It's a really good way of keeping up to date on news and events such as this. So upcoming events. So obviously we've got this evening's. On the 27th of May, we've got a presentation on innovations in footbridges. So this is the AVA project, which is looking to revolutionise the way that footbridges are designed, constructed and installed over the network. We have a talk on the 10th of June on the Warrington Dive Under, and then our last talk before the summer is on the 24th of June on high speed to common design elements. So all these talks are free, they're online and they can be booked on the ICE website just there. So please do have a look there. And then just the final slide before I introduce you to the speakers. Our membership are quite reasonable and we've reduced them because of being mostly online this year. So for ordinary members and fellows, it's £18.50, graduates is £8.75, retired members is £5.50, and then it's free for students. So please do join us. It's great for CBD, it's great for networking, and so please do. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to Pete Roberts, Operations Director at OSL, and Phil Edwards, Head of Rail for OSL, who's going to give this evening's presentation. So I'll pass you over to Peter. Thanks very much.
Evening, gents and ladies. Let me just try and connect up. Screen on. Chris or Gabriel, can you just tell us, can you see the screen, guys?
It's just loading at the moment. Might be worth trying to resharing, Peter.
Yeah, okay. Let me just discard that. Apologies that. Coming on?
Yep, can see it now.
Okay, let me just put it into awesome presentation mode. Yeah. Okay. Hi guys, my name is Pete Roberts. I'm Operations Director for OSL Rail. Phil Edwards, fellow speaker tonight. He's Head of Rail Engineering for the track and civil engineering element of OSL. Thanks for the opportunity tonight. We'll try and give you a bit of a broad overview of the Island Line project, which is an upgrade on Isle of Wight, where we bringing into fruition the new stock, which is Class 484, which we'll come on to in a little while, and some of the challenges around it, including we'll briefly touch upon some of the press, which is out last day, but that was mainly around the infrastructure stock and the delays around that. Okay. That's what we're going to be speaking about tonight. A bit of an intro about Phil and myself, the background and challenges, a little bit about HSQE, so health, safety, quality and engineering assurance, and how we try to progressively assure the job due to the challenges involved in the project. A little bit of the scope about the railway interdisciplines, so touching upon the resignaling of the island, the track element, the civil engineering element, which is split into two sort of functions, one from the civil engineering works around braiding, including culverts, drainage and some of the associated works and platform extensions, and then the other works, which is the platform overlays to supplement the new class 484, which is a slightly different gauge, and then the E&P and the ET, which is third rail in railway systems language. So intro, a bit about OSL Rail. OSL is a multidisciplinary engineering and technical project delivery function. So we look at anything from end-to-end design, installation, construction, manufacturing, soft build, factory acceptance testing, and then test and commissioning to enter into service. We've been established in 2010, got circa 150 employees. We own our own PC, a Principle Contractor license in our own right, which we're using on this Isle of Wight project. And we're probably one of the largest under the main tier 1s and higher level tier 2s, independent turnkey rail systems, and that's all the disciplines for those of people who are not in the rail sector in the UK. A bit about myself, Peter Roberts. I'm looking after the operations in OSL. I'm a chartered civil engineer, fellow member, also fellow of the PWI and the IET. Those are the contacts. Again, we'll probably share this via Chris and Gabriel at the end of the meeting. And then Phil is, as I said, head of rail engineering, which forms the track and civils element in the sector, which covers over 30 years experience, so a very well experienced gentleman. And again, Phil has led the anything from engineering end to end, design, construction, and continued entry into service to hopefully commissioning in middle of May, thing which we'll come on to in the middle of it. So I'm going to go through some of the background and challenges. Phil will take you into some of the detail of the interdisciplines and how we've solved those challenges collaboratively with the client and other stakeholders, because there have been some challenges, but we class them more as looking at an integrated solution for best value for the publics, the stakeholders, and all the other governors on the island. A bit about the island history. It's a slightly aged asset, born out of circa 1880. It's an 8.5 mile line, 13.7k in other stuff. It was electrified in the 60s for ET, third rail, to supplement the power. The track gauge is standard gauge, 1435 millimeters to railway people. Operating speed is currently 45 mile an hour, and looking to keep that thing. The gauge is looking at W6, and the route availability in the railway terms is RA1. Again, we'll come on to some of the challenges of the asset and what we found and how we get to solve it. As we said, on the left-hand side is part of the works, which we'll come on to in a little while, is where we reinstated a passing loop at Braiding, whereas originally it was just a single line through here. So we put a switch and crossing unit, S&C unit, in to function using platform 1 and 2, where previously for the last circa 40-50 years it's only been running through platform 1. On the right hand side is the new stock, which is a class 484, which is an upgraded LU tube line stock. And ultimately, because the gauge and the actual the cab is slightly different alignment to the rail interface, we're having to either lower the track by circa 300 mil or lift the platforms up by circa 300 to 400 mil. So that's the challenge in essence, and we'll come through some of those challenges, how we've overcome them as well. The other thing we're doing on the island is converting the signalling system from Route Relay Interlocking, which is an older system, into a Solid State Interlocking, which is not the newer system, but is a reasonably new system, but it's also scalable for future timetable changes and other stock and other infrastructure, particularly the signalling fraternity, or where it can be signalled from. And we'll come onto a little bit of where we're at with that as well. The programs are predominantly being delivered in a very tight, challenging program. So contract award was 5th of November, which was circa 6 weeks late, and we've had a design and build contract under the JCT form, and we're looking at handover entry into service in the middle of May. As I say, it's slightly delayed from the original timetable because of underlying conditions with some of the substratas, particularly around the platform, lack of foundation and structural integrity in the main. Okay. Some of the challenges we've encountered. We probably tackled this in the middle of the worldwide pandemic, and again we've come and solved and collaboratively worked with the client on how to work around these pandemic challenges, particularly around interfaces between public, interfaces between hotels, staff, ferries, etc., etc. Brexit has played a part because of the procurement issues involved in that. So a lot of the parts from the rail infrastructure and some of the signalling fraternity, particularly in some of the power, are manufactured abroad. So we have to manage and deal with these challenges to manage it, to get the program. Restricted ferry crossings, one due to just COVID, and also two due to winds and other weather issues. But like on the whole, that's been very well managed and pretty much in hand. On this particular job, from a railway point of view or rail infrastructure delivery point of view, we are using no trains because there's on a normal rail renewal as such in the UK. We normally function via trains, so we use haulage, they call it. So that could be trains for new rail, the sleepers and ballast. On this occasion, everything's had to come along across on the ferry. The other sort of biggest challenge we've encountered is some of the aged asset, and that's mainly down to some of the structural integrity of the foundations, particularly at Braiding and Shanklin, and the platform substratas. In essence, Phil will come on to in a little wee while. They're built on lack of foundation. That's not any derogation of the infrastructure owner. It's just where we want to run the new stock. The asset dictates us lowering the track, which subsequently necessitates doing something to the platform substructures and integrity. The other thing we've touched upon again is the age signalling asset, which we're upgrading to SSI, and it's all to do with the Class 484 introduction. You may have seen something on the news yesterday evening on BBC where there are some delays with the train running. We are trying to work collaboratively with the client to support both dynamic testing, driver trainer operation and fault finding to support that. So we are working around with them during our works, construction works, to facilitate that at the minute. Again, I won't read these verbatim, but what we've had to do to maintain COVID. So prior to our blockade starting in January, the island was at tier 1. It went into tier 4 circa 10 days before. So we were always going to put extra mitigations and measures in place. What we've done with this, we've had additional welfare cabins, excuse me, reduced face-to-face signing in at site access control, and we've employed COVID champions just to reinforce and assist in that social distancing and other stuff. We've also installed a PASS system, which is a personal access sanitization system, again, which I'll come on to in a minute, which has aided both at hotels. So this is a system which basically tracks your temperature when you come in, and also sprays like a neutral mist, but also logs you. The important thing is logs you and tracks you via the app, but also tracks you via the infrastructure. So it's been a very successful implementation. So we've done this on our own behalf to implement it, and to date we've had a very tight control of COVID on the island. As we said, the scheme is ultimately about the introduction of the Class 484. This is the old stock going off the island. Again, we assisted in this. The photo on the left is at Right St John's. I think the right one is as well. So that's where they've demobilised a lot of the stock. A little bit about the aged asset. So on the left hand side, as you say, it's an old system of signalling system which we're upgrading. The second photo along where we're doing heavy maintenance, and that's from a track and other disciplines. So we're reconfiguring a lot of the joint control temperature for regulated to a compliant JCT for critical rail temperature, but also giving them a more conformant railway. On the last but one on the last photo, there's where we've planned to do structural extensions of 17 metres to facilitate the new trains and supplementary gauging, but we've had to dig and redo the old platforms, and Phil will touch on them in a little while. A little bit about HSQE. So as we said, we're managing HSQE in the island via our Principle Contractor licence. We're managing all the safety controls, CDM, so all of that is under our banner. We do the RAMs, which is risk assessment method statements, so all CPP, WPPs, task briefs and other controls into and out over the work sites. Extra COVID controls, competence. The added extra is SQL on this project, so it is a SQL project, and we've successfully passed that and delivering that in collaboration with South West Rail. That's our Principal Contractor licence. A little bit about sustainability due to the nature of SQL, but also in the heart of OSL's business. We look about sustainability both from a procurement point of view and a stakeholder management and a long-term user and all that good stuff. What we try to do in this job is look at local labour from a haulage materials and where possible using local plant companies to facilitate the works, and that's proved successful at the minute, both from a risk of CO2 emissions, but also from a COVID risk perspective as well. The way we look at HSQE and planning and programming particularly is around like a PD, Plan, Do, Check, Act cycle, which is a continuously improvement cycle where we start at lessons learned and it's all about planning up front, because planning up front reduces the risk to both operations and future stuff as well. And the other thing we look at as well is a progressive assurance. So this is part of what we look at every day. We do a daily wash-up call, which is like a plan, do, check, act call, where we look at the previous day's update, but also look at where we can learn from the previous days. This is just a recurrence of that. So yeah, what we do, we manage the PC boundary, access egress, anything on or off site is managed through ourselves. We do operate the plant operating scheme on the island as a POS license, but we also do KPI reporting both for SQL but also for some of our client needs, including carbon, close calls, noise, waste, etc., because we do have Section 61s in place. And lastly, we as we said, from a design perspective, we are doing progressive assurance due to the tight timescales of the program. That's working very well, and ultimately that will lead into and hopefully expedite the health and safety file compilation. We have got a little bit of temporary works design and temporary works coordination on the island, which we manage internally in-house as well, which has proved successful. And that's it. So on an overall scope point of view, we are tackling most disciplines in this aspect of the works, and that travels from end-to-end design, construction, manufacture, installation and testing, commission, and entry into service. So most of the disciplines you can see here. So we do signalling, which is the SSI in-house, and that's design, install, and test, including the TICs who hand it back into operations. The second photo along is where we manufacture. So that's our facility at Crewe, where we manufactured circa 22 location cases and other supplementary supporting equipment. The third photo is at Braiding, where we've installed a switch and crossing unit, and Phil will touch a little bit on that. We've also done a supplementary LV and HV, third rail, ETE, platform overlays on the left-hand bottom, signaling, solid state interlocking signaling, some training and consultancy, and what we are doing is additional training for some of the signallers on the island of upgrading how to use the system, additional telecoms, and some minor civils and major civils now as turned out. So for those of you, what we got looking at here, so we're changing the island to solid state interlocking using a SSI panel. So that's what we're looking at here. Where in our Crewe facility, we have simulators where we run the interlocking, where we are attaching it to the panel. What this does is it takes you from an entry into service point of view, where you've done a lot of the factory acceptance testing and all the pre-principles testing offline. So ultimately you're going through a pre-approved product with the relevant engineers. On the right hand side there, it's a little bit small, apologies, that's the existing signalling system in the island. So it's all on levers and other older, not archaic stuff, but it's just the traditional system for route relays. And then on the left hand side is some of the location cases which have transferred from a facility, and they're down now, built and in situ, ready, starting to get tested and completed. It's a little bit about the factory build which we've done in our facility in Crewe. So we've done circa 22 location cases and some refurbed, 14 new signals, 1 SSI cubicle, circa 40,000 of cables, and 25 number axle counters using the Frauscher technology. These are these little things here which count axles in, count axles out, which is a fail-safe mechanism which supports the SSI interlocking system. A little bit more about that, so a little bit more detail. So over here you've got the axle counter, and then the axle counter head. What we got here, and then we've done some POE, points operating equipment refurbishment at Sandown, where they were traditionally on a hand signalling and a hand lock system, where now we put them as part of the SSI data and SSI control. And then that's some of the live-ish photos. So we've reinstated a new friction buffer stop at Shanklin at the end of the line. We've put a new signals in at these locations here along the route, and that's part of the installation of a location base. So you've got the earth mats gone down and then the pre-bases. We've also had to do additional scope due to the existing infrastructure capacity. So we've done a PSP, a new PSP, so a principal supply point at Sandown to support that, and new route, a new route all the way through as well to support the signalling power. Now I'll hand over to Phil, who will touch upon track civils and the supporting infrastructure. Thank you.
Good evening. So as Pete alluded to earlier, so the actual track work element out of the 8.5 mile section is 6 miles long. So within that there was 6 stations, of which there were 9 platforms associated with those, all of which needed bringing up in height due to the new rolling stock. So the solution, rather than rebuilding the stations, was to install an overlay. Predominantly it's a single line route. You've got a passing loop at Sandown, and it goes to a 2-line section at Smallbrook down to Pier. So to enable a 4-car service as opposed to a 2-car, so the plan was to run a 4-car in the summer. There needed to be an additional passing loop at Braiding to allow the timetable to work. So Braiding existing platform was going to be a track lower, and Shanklin, which is the end of the line, due to it being a listed building, was also a track lower. Traditionally on the network you have a 915 vertical and a 730 horizontal platform gauge, but on the island, to help with the passenger restricted movement, it was decided that the platforms will be level boarding, so obviously no step down, and there'd be gap fillers in between the platforms to allow movement on and off of the train without getting stuck in the gap. So with it being a single line, and there's only one access point for material and RRVs, which was down at Sandown, which was middle to the end of the line. The plan, because it's a category 5 track, was to use serviceable material. With COVID, there was the amount of available serviceable material wasn't available, so we ended up having to use new. COVID-19, usually there's an hour service on the ferries, and they reduced that to every 2 hours and sometimes every 3 hours. So the thoughts of getting people on and off the island each day, we ended up having to hotel people. And then we also had, obviously, if you have a 10-week shutdown, which this initially was, everyone would decide to come and do the works required on the island. So the island line was the setup for the island line. Network Rail were the landlord, so, and they let the railway to SWR, who ran the trains, maintained the platforms, and maintained both track and also signalling infrastructure. So whilst we went through the design stages, we had to go to Network Rail for agreement to change their infrastructure as the landlord. We also had a few scope gaps on platform 2. There was no lighting, and then obviously needed lighting, so that was additional. The PRM walking route from platform 1 to 2 originally was going 250 meters distance, and we managed to work with SWR collaboratively to reduce that down to a 50-meter travel from platform to platform. So when we turned up on January the 4th, well, December 2020, once we had contract award, the first thing was to start the design. So we had a Form 1 and a Form A design from the client. We did some trial holes and core samplings of the platforms, and it was found that the platform walls wouldn't take the track lowering, and actually when our designers did the calculations, the walls were at failure mode already, albeit that was for 5 kilonewton loading as per you would get at Paddington or King's Cross or any of the other Network Rail stations. There was also the issue with the listed consent for Pier, Ryde St John's, Esplanade, Braiding and Shanklin stations. So choosing the right material and then the availability of the right material was key, and trying to get the suppliers within COVID and getting everything from the mainland or trying to source it from the island as much as possible was key. Due to the change in design, we couldn't wait till get an AFC to start construction, so we needed to progressively assure each part of the design stage with additional IDCs, additional meetings to sign off the design to allow certain sectors to be built to allow the programme to keep on programme. I spoke about the self-assurance. So here we are, this is Braiding. So Braiding, as Pete mentioned earlier, had a passing loop on it at some stage in its life, which was removed, and we were going to reinstate this. So to enable to get a 4-car, the platform needed extending, so there's an 18-metre extension plus some associated coper adjustments. Once we got the load-ins, we found that there's no foundations. The solution that was chosen was to use a kingpin wall. So this was an I section which was 3.5 meters long, which was augured into the ground, filled with concrete, and then reinforcements between the I section and also then poured with concrete, and then the concrete was at the level of the ballast, of the top ballast finish level, and then to complete the wall there is a C40 timber required, which was a requirement from the listed buildings as opposed to just filling it up with concrete. At Shanklin, because we had the ability on this being the end of the line and also the access point, we built a ramp right in the car park. The decision was to knock down the existing wall and rebuild. During the process of design and looking at the canopy support, there was circa 9 legs on the canopy that when we dug down to look at the foundations, we found out that the foundations wouldn't, they didn't go low enough to substantiate the new footings that we need to dig out. So there was quite a lot of temporary works required to support the canopies. So once the walls were stabilised, it allowed the track to be built. So we used platform 1 road, which is the single line as it was when we came, as a haul road, and we used RRVs with trailers to remove the spoil and also to bring in ballast. We used RRV diggers to be driven to the island from Sandown to Braiding, and we used an RRV dozer again that can come by rail from the access point at Sandown. Once we completed platform 2 renewals, we were then able to lay the track, remove the track on platform 1, and we would then do the stabilisation on platform 1. Once the stabilisation was complete, we were then able to renew the track. At either end of the track, we had S&C, and there are 2 DVS turnouts, 113 1056 rail, and these were ordered and built off site, and then delivered loose to site, and then we'd bring it to site and we loose built, as they say in the railway, we loose built it in the hole. So some pictures here of platform 1, obviously platform 2's in, and a picture of the S&C, which was fully stoned, awaiting for a tamper to come. Also within Braiding there is a underpass, so it's Braiding Cattle Creek. Now, as you would expect, it was for years ago for cattle to pass underneath the railway. To enable the track to be lowered, the Cattle Creek needed to be infilled, and we needed to put a pipe just to aid drainage. During the discussions with the landlord, Network Rail, we needed to do a flood analysis, hydraulic report, to understand what water would pass through Cattle Creek within the 100 and 150 year flooding. This allowed us then to design, rather than 1 pipe, we needed 2 pipes, and due to the structure then, we were a simple design of gabion structure, then turned into reinforced head wall and mass concrete pour. The PRM walking route, so the bottom part of the picture showed in the orange was where you'd get onto platform 1, you'd need to, it was type 1 and tarmac, and you'd go to Jones's crossing, you'd cross the line and then you'd come back. Within our progressive assurance and design build with SWR, we managed to change the PRM from low mileage to high mileage, where at the end of the platform, top of the ramp, we would put a 1 in 20 fall in, a couple of landings, and then we'd cross the 2-line section and then come back up to top of ramp on platform 2. It also enabled Barnes Crossing, which was going to be shut, which is a walking route for the residents, to stay open, allowing access down the footpath from Shanklin all the way into Braiding. And like I said earlier, circa 50 to 60 metres out of the 240 distance was reduced. Shanklin track work, so Shanklin, again single line, we excavated using dumpers. Now at Shanklin it used to again be a 2-section railway at some point in its life, so we were able to run the dumpers alongside what would have been the redundant platform, and ballast was in the car park, spoil went into the car park, the sleepers and rails were brought down from Sandown. So within the track, everything that we disposed of, so whether that was track panels or rails, they all went to the steam museum for reuse. Certain signals went to the steam museum as well for reuse. So the picture on the screen now shows the elaborate temporary works that was needed to install to support the canopy. And as you can see, traditionally we would have just gone for a block build platform, but due to the listed building consents, we needed to do we used block work due to the quickness of build, and then we had to put a fake brick face on, which was selected by the listed building offset, which we had several samples of brick to tie into the existing brick that was at Shanklin Station. The ETE, with putting in a new loop line, we also needed to put in a electrify platform 2, and we needed to also electrify the new S&C areas. We utilised the reinforcement rail that would have been redundant to become the third rail on platform 2, and we also upgraded the line from hook switches to isolation switches that you can see at the front. So there's 4 isolation switches at Braiding, and also the diagrams for Eastleigh, who are the electrical control, needed to be updated. Platform overlays, as you can see on the platform, so the platforms here, wooden platforms at Lake and Smallbrook. So you've got an I section which is fastened down to the platform. You then have a riser unit that you can adjust to get your platform height, so we could fine tune rather than tamping the track. It's a full system, so the copers come fully white lined, and the tactiles are the last job, which they come and they get stuck down. The yellow line is part of the comes part of the build. So as you can see on the pictures, the middle section is the new 484 class. So to assist South West Rail with double check engaging, we actually took the only unit they've got on the line out of the train care depot at Ryde St John's with a Unimog, and we towed it on to platform 1 at Ryde St John's, where we could prove the level boarding and also the integrity of the system of the overlay. As you can see from the lower picture, during the decommission of the old 483 units that we towed out and craned out, we took a picture to show the height difference. So in circa, there's anything from 200 to 440 mil of overlay height. Again, some current progress. So the old units going out, the final tamped layout at Braiding, the final fake wall at Shanklin. We've got the installers installing the and testing the lokes, and then we've got the fully set up DB switches down at Braiding. We're now into the final stages on the island, so all the track work is complete, all the platform build is complete. We're now into the final touches of tarmacking. We've got some lighting columns to do on platform 2, and we're going through the huge paper exercise of bringing this line into service. So the install of the signalling is complete in 4 foot. The power is being turned into 2 for the lokes and signals in 2 stages. So spur 1 was turned on a couple of weeks ago, and spur 2's been turned on this week, which now gives power to everything that the testers need to start testing through. We've taken the opportunity of bringing the panel SSI cubicle into Swindon so we can test this off-site. So as Pete alluded to earlier, when it gets transformed and transported to Ryde signal box, it's basically a plug and play, so a lot quicker exercise than having to rewire and test on site.
yeah, including some of the ergonomics and idiosyncrasies around the panel working. Thanks. I think we're not too bad on time. Any questions?
Thank you, Peter and Phil. Yeah, we've had a few questions already come through. I can read them out to you, and if you're all right to answer them. So
Fine.
the first question from Andy Franklin is, the Isle of Wight has been for a long while using shingle ballast, but I know you're using stone ballast. Where was this sourced, and how was it delivered to the island?
Yeah, quite right. It's, as they say on the island, it's beach ballast, so the shingle on the island. So on both track renewals, the ballast was brought from the mainland, and it was, so we used 2 local companies on the island.
Yeah.
So when they went from the Isle of Wight onto the mainland with deliveries, we managed to set up a deal with them so they'd go out loaded, and then they'd come back with material, so whether that was ballast, whether it's sleepers, rail, etc. So we utilised the same quarries that Network Rail would use. We utilised track work to get the sleepers and rail up in Doncaster. Yeah, and I think we used Midlands Quarry.
Midland Quarry. We used Westbury, I believe, as well. So we, due to COVID restriction on ballast quantities, some of the restrictions on Network Rail, excuse me, where we couldn't access supply chain operations, Andy, we got it delivered in either 20 tonners and other tonners from Reynolds and Reed, were one of our big supporting partners on the island, and George Jenkins Transport. We delivered, not piecemeal, but sort of piecemeal, to Sandown and Shanklin. Accordingly, as Phil alluded to, we managed to create an access point into Shanklin to support the infrastructure work and the staging, and the rest of the job was staged and sort of transported and hauled out of Sandown. So yeah, we worked to the specification of Network Rail, so we went back to that specification. We did ask him were there any ways we could use the existing ballast on the island, but we were told via South West Rail and Network Rail that we had to use a specification, so that's where that went back to the mainland. Okay.
Thank you both. So we've got another question on carbon. Was whole life carbon considered for the project?
It was, as I say, we were under sequel, albeit in a very tight timescale. So I don't know if you guys know, with sequel is sometimes thought about in early grip stages and early development stages. We picked this project up in sort of a, not grip 4, but as Phil alluded to, like a Form A and a Form 1. The contract was delayed by circa a month, but saying that, we had to follow sequel through, which was, big push on sustainability, big push on carbon, etc., etc. So where we could use serviceable materials, we wanted to. Where we could use people on the island, local SMEs, we did. So for anything from haulage, as Phil alluded to, we used Reynolds and Reed, George Jenkins, and other local labour suppliers. And also we supplemented that because due to the nature of COVID and other challenges, we ended up using local hotels as well. So we had to stay over to, 1, reduce the COVID impact, but 2, to try and give a better work-life balance and travelling from both labour and other stuff. So yeah.
Thank you. We've got a question here from Ian Earl. Are you raising all of the platforms? Why, he mentions, why not take the bed back down to where it was before, and have you had to lower the track under the bridges?
Do you mean a high level on that? So the job kicks back from the tunnel at in between Ryde, St John's and Esplan from an infrastructure point of view. So we are doing 9, I think it's circa 9 platform overlays, which is raising the platforms up by circa anything from 2 to 400 mil. The 2 track renewals were at Shanklin and Sandown, were necessitated due to the 1, the passing loop, and then 2, the end of the line infrastructure. When we looked at the alignments, you are right that in, I think it's circa 1960s, 70s, the track alignment was probably on circa that alignment. But the probably scope and the cost-effective benefit of the platform overlays, which is a modular system, dictated that, and due to the timescales. So if we needed to do 9-10 track renewals on the island, be it with the restricted haulage, it would have been a challenge. But also the ultimate challenge which we had was the structural integrity of all those platforms.
And there was a previous part of the Isle of Wight project where they lowered down at Ryde St John's the 2-track railway under one of the bridges. Yeah, the 2 bridges. It was Ryde and Smallbrook, I believe, the 2 overbridges there. So they did, as part of the enabling works, which we were unsuccessful for, was lowered as part of that first early stage works.
Thank you. Yeah, we've got quite a considerable amount of questions. I'm not sure whether we'll be able to go through all of them. There's well over 30. So I'll just ask the audience to, if you can, if there's any questions that you feel applicable to you or were you're interested in answering, could you click the like button so that we can filter out the favourite questions? But I'll continue down as I go along.
Or even send them to us after. If it's just an interesting one, we're happy to answer it. You know, yeah, it's been a good job. It's been a challenging job. We're reaching the end game now, and yeah.
I'll try to filter down to questions that we haven't discussed. But we've got another question from Andy Franklin, and I think that you guys mentioned a little bit about taking old material out and sending it to the museum.
Yeah.
But did you have to dispose or get rid of any old track material, and if so, did you remove that from the island?
No,
God, no.
So I suppose the expense to get scrap off the island, Network Rail agreed, because it's their asset, to gift the steam railway the track and some of the old signalling structures. The rest of the rail from the heavy maintenance, which we needed to do, all of that has gone back to into the metal skips and back to Network Rail. As far as the spoil that we removed during our engineering works, Reynolds and Mead on the island have a disposal unit where they segregate it and sieve it and reuse it. So we managed to not take any scrap or spoil off the island.
And I suppose the only when we did do trials, there was a minor bit of contamination, which was just under the structure at Braiding, where we had to get it disposed of in a slightly different way. But again, that was managed via Reynolds and Reed for, you know, ticketing and audit purposes. So where possible, keep the carbon footprint. We kept it on the island or gifted it via Network Rail to the steam railway, or that type of ilk.
Okay, thank you. We've got a question here from Toby Parker. Will the track through Ryde Tunnel require lowering to achieve the required clearances for the Class 484s?
There's been a lot of rumour on the island saying that it won't fit, but speaking with the SWR engineers, the tunnel's been laser swept, and from the information I had, yes, the train will fit through it.
As we said, that was never part of our scope. We have seen some gauging reports. We do believe it's clear, but that's part of the their work at the minute.
Okay, thank you. And John Gribble asked, what works have been done to the pier, and can both platforms be used?
So in answer to that, no, both platforms won't be used at the pier. So the existing platform has just had an overlay installed on it. As far as the pier strengthening works, that's phase 2, where Network Rail will be coming in to strengthen the pier works. I'm not sure of when the dates are for that. I believe it's in CP6, so in the next sort of 3 years.
Thank you. Okay, so I've got another question from Andy Franklin. So how is access to the new foot crossing at Braiding controlled? It's very rare these days for a new foot crossing to be created as opposed to providing a bridge.
So there's with it being listed, there is a footbridge at Braiding. At the moment, it is structurally unsafe. So Network Rail are putting a temporary scaffolding bridge to allow passengers to go from platform 1 to 2. The PRM walking route will be controlled by phones to the signalman to allow allow for access for sort of push chairs and disability scooters down the PRM.
Thank you. We've got another question from it's an anonymous question. Was any provision made to restore the service to Ventnor or onto the Heritage Railway if required at any point?
Yeah, so as part of the early works, there's an S&C unit that's been procured by South West Rail. It didn't go in on the early works due to some design issues, I believe, but that S&C unit is going to be delivered on the island, and I believe it is a requirement, or Network Rail will put it in at some point to allow the pier works. As far as extending the line, I'm not 100% sure where that sits with funding.
Thank you. So the next question is, why and when is the Braiding footbridge due to be removed for renovations?
So the why is it's structurally unsafe at the moment. It's not part of our scope. The landlord, so Network Rail have designed this, and their contractors, Osborne's, who we're working with at the moment to gain them access to allow them to put the temporary structure up. So the temporary structure was required to be installed ready for the summer timetable. I don't have any dates of when the existing structure is going to be removed for refurb.
Thank you. Colin Potter's asked, is there an issue with flooding off the lower track in the tunnel at Ryde?
Yeah, there is, and they have a quite a big pumping unit which pumps the water out into the sea. If you go to Esplanade, where the hovercrafts come in, you can see the pipe outlet that sticks out of the wall.
And as I say, with that was part of the phase 1 works which we didn't complete. So the 2 track lowers at Ryde Overbridge and Smallbrook Overbridge was part of that, which did have some flood risk, and which was hopefully mitigated doing those works.
Thank you. Yeah, we've got quite a lot of questions still. We've got way over 40 at the moment, so I'll try to go through them as the audience picks them. So the next question from Robert Salkeld. Have the new electrical supply and signalling systems that you've installed included any passive provision for the capacity to support the reinstatement of the railway at Shanklin to Ventnor?
No. The signalling system, so the ETE, so during the works we renewed the ETE. We didn't need to provide any more additional supplies. The 3 substations have been refurbished by Network Rail during it. The signalling system and the power, but there wasn't a future proofing for. But
it is, what I would say is it's scalable because it's SSI, so it's modules and attachments to the location cases, and then the cabinet and the cubicle. So it is scalable in that essence, if that makes sense. So the power has been upgraded to facilitate this new works, and yes, because it's SSI and it's through a cubicle and it's modules, it can be modified and upgraded that way quite easily. So from a signalling system, yes. From an ET, probably, but we've only done what we need to do, if that makes sense, and additional capacity for the additional passing loop and the electrification of those extra bits.
Thank you very much. The next question is, can northbound trains at Sandown use either platform?
No, so at Sandown, at Braiding, yes, Braiding platform 1 is bidirectional, but at Sandown, no.
Thank you. James, hold on, so apologies. Because as people start liking them, they start shifting around. Okay, is the signalling being upgraded along the entire route, or is mechanical signalling at Ryde being retained?
So mechanical at Ryde has been maintained. It's got the added function of TPWS on all signals.
Thank you. James Neville asked, some of the tracks between Ryde St John's Road Station and Ryde Tunnel appear to be life expired. Does the upgrade include renewal of the life expired track?
The scope didn't go any further than Smallbrook for the rail adjusting and new rails was Ryde St John's. So anything from Ryde St John's to Pier will either be future work
or future maintenance. So when we had our scope, the maintainer and Southwest Rail and Network Rail as the landlords and infrastructure owners scoped it as in done all the structural integrity, ballast, life cycle and that stuff, which didn't dictate us doing renewals at the minute at those locations as part of our scope.
Thank you. We've got a question here from Simon Holt from Atkins. He mentions interesting talk. Thanks. Did you face any geotechnical challenges?
Yes.
Yes, quite. So the island line is built on clay and chalk. So whilst we're doing the Shanklin works, albeit we did GI and probes, we still encountered quite a few soft spots within the platform areas whilst we're doing the lowers, where we needed to remove existing material to get down to a substrata, and then we'd be backfilling it with type 1 to get the compaction requirement.
And on that, yes, we did, due to the very nature, one, the scope, and two, the nature of what we found out there, because you know, it is an aged asset, but it was a good challenge, and I think we've overcome a lot of those challenges, finding some of the sort of infrastructure asset, particularly from a geotech point of view, of what we found beneath the surface. Like where we didn't actually walk the site, so we just had photos, so we could see, and visually looking at the site from the platforms, you can see the aged asset in some locations, both challenging geometrically, alignment and actual componentry. As Phil alluded to, we have done a lot of heavy maintenance as well. So what we've redone is resynced all the joints along the island, because it is a jointed railway versus continuously welded rail. So what we have done is given them back a compliant, from a critical rail temperature perspective, railway, so it's easier to manage and mitigate that. You know, if you had a full renewal scheme on there, yes, we've probably seen things where you would upgrade them and probably give you a renewal bank or a maintenance work bank over that next couple of years.
Yeah, there was dip joints throughout the railway, so we ended up cutting circa 1.2 meters off every rail. There's 1,200 joints that got reformed, and then inserting additional rails to take out the shortfall of cutting sort of 1.2 meters off each rail.
And then the maintainer's picked up not the shortfall, but he's done the easier with his smaller team, I'd guess, of the resleepering. So we've added and omitted some scope to one while we're there, where we got the shuttle line. So the heavier maintenance stuff we've completed in collaboration with the maintainer on Southwest Rail.
Thank you. just a little conscious of time. Maybe we can do maybe two or three more questions if that's okay with you guys.
Yep.
Yeah. So the next question from Stuart George: have the semaphore signals been replaced by colour light?
So basically, we've got two parts to the railway. So from Pier to Smallbrook, you keep the semaphore signalling, and then from Smallbrook to Shanklin was replaced with new lightweight fold down LED signals.
Thank you. So next question is, with respect to signalling, is this now controlled from one point, and if so, is this completely new or using one of the existing modified signal boxes?
So the existing signal box at Ryde St John's, we needed, presently there was a panel there that took the signalling from Smallbrook to Shanklin. We've produced a new panel with all the new signals, all the new axe counters, the passing loop, turning all the existing S&C into power. So when you look at the traditional signal box in Ryde St John's, you've got one side of it which is mechanical hand levers, and the other side that's electrical. But we didn't have to build additional signal box. We managed to fit the existing panel within the existing signal box.
Yeah, including all the challenges. I say challenges around ergonomics and user friendliness and all that good stuff. And then the SSI cubicle as well. We function in that as part of that build in allocation as well. So it's mainly run, in a short way. It's run out of Ryde St John's still, albeit slightly different configuration.
Okay, so maybe let's finish off with one question. We've got the next one here from Robert Pritchard, and I think it's a bit related to what you were mentioning at the start, Peter. So he said, great talk, thanks. It's a bit frustrating that the infrastructure works will largely be completed on time, but the trains will not be ready now until later in the summer. Do you have any ideas when is the next 484 due to arrive on the island?
So we passed one on the A34 about a week ago, and that was going down to Eastleigh. Ready for fault-free running. Yeah, I mean, throughout the whole build, there was always rumours that there was difficulties with the 484s, but I only found out on Monday that they're in serious trouble with some of the software issues within the unit. So even leading up to the few weeks ago, they were still thinking that they'd sort the software issues, but they've had a train running up and down at Eastleigh overnight, and they've obviously found too many issues with the software.
Yeah, as Phil alluded to, and I alluded at the beginning, it's been a challenging project just from the timescales, and and we started late contract award, and it's been a circa 5 to 6 month end-to-end from surveys, design, including reintroduction of a new signalling system and track civils and on all the associated systems. If you look at the later contract and the substratas we found at Braiding, we may even be early into May from an end-to-end perspective. But again, from if you look at the BBC News yesterday on which was quite a good show, it shows quite a good of things, but some of the challenges that Phil alluded to, we haven't been kept aware of them. So we've still been asked to help out and support, which we have collaboratively, to help and support running trains. But only on Monday and then yesterday when the BBC programme out, we've fully found the truth, if we're honest. So yeah, we still help and we are looking at when, for instance, we've been looking at when we can do testing. We've tried to demobilise testing from a signalling system to allow them to run trains or help them with the driver training and dynamic testing and fault finding. And I guess we'll continue to do that until we've commissioned and entering the service. Is the honest answer.
Yeah, one other thing for your members. As social media goes, that we had quite a lot of drone footage done by SWR. So if you went onto YouTube and searched Isle of Wight, you'll see definitely see the first stage of the 2 bridge lowerings down at Smallbrook and Ryde St John's, and I'd say over the next couple of weeks you'll see the works that we've done at Braiding.
Yeah.
I've seen a preview, and there's some really good footage there of what was happening there during the construction period.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, yeah, so just like to say, Peter and Phil, thank you very much for this presentation. Clearly there's been a lot of interest. We've had over, well, close to 50 questions so far from the members, and apologies to those questions we couldn't get through, but you know, clearly a very interesting talk. We had about close to 170 attendees at the peak, and also thanks to Chris Hyde for organising this talk on behalf of the RCEA. Just a message to the members to please do join us at the next talk. We often hold talks on the last Thursday of every month, and the next one is going to be on innovation of footbridges across the network rail network. So thank you very much, Peter and Phil, and I think we'll leave it here.
Oh, thanks for having us. Been a pleasure. And if anyone does need our details, you know, any questions or support, feel free to just get in touch either on LinkedIn or other media outlets. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you very much. Have a good evening.
Have a good evening, guys. Cheers.
Bye. Bye.